Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. Today's show is brought to you by Do, the Reminders app. I'm John Voorhees, and I'm going to be driving this ship solo today, so let's dig into what happened this week. The big news, of course, was the Apple event on Monday, where Apple debuted a 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. But that wasn't all that they debuted. First, before they got to the computers, they talked a little bit about the HomePod, music, and AirPods. There are new colors of HomePods. We have a story from Alex about that. They come in orange, yellow, and blue, as well as the black, which I guess is space gray, and white, which were already in the lineup. There's a new plan for Apple Music, which is a $5 a month plan, $4.99 to be exact, that is voice activated only. It works with Siri. It doesn't have all the features of the other Apple Music plans, but if you're someone who's just looking for some background music and is happy just demanding their music be played by Siri, it could work for you, so check it out. And to round out the music announcements, Alex has a story about the AirPods 3. Now, these don't replace the AirPods 2, which have been out for several years. Those are still available, but these have more features. They have basically most of the functionality of the AirPods Pro, but they don't have the in-ear silicone tips, and they don't have noise cancellation or transparency mode. They do have a design, though, that is a lot closer and resembles the AirPods Pro now. And they have the squeeze functionality for playing, pausing, skipping, and that sort of thing. So check those out. They're $179. And the main event of Monday was the new MacBook Pros. And Apple spent a lot of time not just on the computers themselves, but on the chips that drive these computers. And those are a variant of the M1. We've had the M1 for a while now, driving both the iPad Pro as well as a Mac Mini, the new M1 iMac, and the lower-end MacBook Pro. These, though, are larger chips that feature onboard GPUs. We've got the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, and they come in multiple configurations in terms of the number of CPU cores and GPU cores. If you want to find out the details in terms of a lot of the things like the speed and so forth, you'll want to check out my story on MacStories. The big story here is the GPU cores, as well as things like the memory bandwidth, which is double on the Max from what it is on the Pro. The Pro has, I think it's 200 gigabytes per second, and it's 400 on the Max. But then we got to the actual MacBook Pro itself, which is a redesigned version of the MacBook Pro. It looks a lot like the original MacBook Pro, but there are differences. For instance, the bezels around the edge of the screen are very narrow. They're 3.5 millimeters, and there's a cutout notch for the FaceTime camera, which is now 1080p and takes advantage of an image signal processor, just like the M1 iMac does, to get better picture quality in low light. Now, a lot of people are pretty unhappy about this notch, but personally, doesn't bother me. I'm just happy that the screen reaches closer to the edge and that the bezels are so thin. That display is a mini LED display, very much like the iPad Pro, but they're bigger, of course. The 14-inch model has a 14.2-inch diagonal display and 16.2 inches diagonally. And both of them are bright, support like 1 billion colors. I think the brightness is 1,000,000 to 1, and have sustained brightness of 1,000 nits with peaks at 1,600, which should be a really nice display for anybody doing video and photography work. The keyboards are different now, too. The touch bar is gone. There's a Touch ID button up in the upper right-hand corner, and the keyboard is a bit reminiscent of the Magic keyboard that came with the M1 iMac. Has the same row of function buttons. That touch bar is gone, replaced by full height function keys, which is the first time we've had full height function keys on any Mac laptop in a very long time. And they're, as I said, physical function buttons that have particular functionality tied to them, just like they do on the Magic keyboard. The other part of the story for the MacBook Pro is the I/O. There's an HDMI port, 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, an SD card slot, and an improved 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. On top of that, there's MagSafe 3. This is a new version of MagSafe that can handle fast charging. The computers come in silver and space gray, and the 14-inch one starts at $1,999, while the 16-inch starts at $2,499. You can, of course, configure them up to some pretty nosebleed prices, but those are the start prices. All right, moving on from there. There are a bunch of other articles that we did during the event that you might want to check out too. We have one that collects all the product videos that were used during the presentation on Monday. And my favorite one is the opening video, which showed 45 years of Apple sounds being used to create a song using Logic, I believe it was, in a garage. It was really neat. There's also the By the Numbers story, which this time around is particularly useful if you're curious about what all the numbers mean and what they are, because Apple threw out an extraordinary number of those sorts of things. Plus, we have a story called All the Small Things. And that's where we really dive into Twitter, other websites, and find little details on Apple's own website and report them there. That's where you'll find things like how fast charging differs on the 14-inch model versus the 16-inch model, and a whole lot more. All right, last but not least, I should mention our availability story from Monday, which just runs down when all these things are going to be available. Today's Friday, and next week you can expect macOS Monterey on Monday, and the MacBook Pros will start to be delivered to customers on Tuesday and be available in stores. The dates on those have slipped significantly, though, so if you haven't ordered one yet, I looked earlier today, and the dates are kind of mid-November to late November already, and maybe even later on some of the more customized versions of the MacBook Pro. Also, those HomePods that come in those special colors aren't going to be available until November. So we've got a little bit of time to wait on those as well. All right, let's talk about a couple of other things that were on the site this week. Federico had two stories this week. One was all about Yoink. And Yoink is a utility on the Mac and iOS that we have been long users of at MacStories. Federico and I are both big fans of this app. And it received a recent update that uses picture-in-picture and some new APIs that Apple offers to developers to monitor your system clipboard on iOS and iPadOS, letting the app work as a clipboard manager. Now, this is really a really unusual use of picture-in-picture, but it's not unprecedented among apps. There are some other apps that do things that are similar. And what it does is it only does this if you manually allow it to monitor your clipboard. So you select Monitor My Clipboard and for how long. And once you do that, it has picture-in-picture open in a static image that shows you what's being copied. And then if you want, you can just slide it off to the side, just like a picture-in-picture video. So it's out of your way as you're using your iPhone or your iPad, and you can then slide it back into view when you need something off the clipboard. It's super clever, and I hope that Apple allows it to stay on the App Store, because it's probably not the intended use of picture-in-picture. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not. However, it is a great solution to a problem that iOS and iPadOS have had for a long time, which is the lack of a proper clipboard manager. Federico also covered a really nice Safari extension. We've seen so many neat Safari extensions come out for iOS and iPadOS over the last few weeks since iOS and iPadOS 15 shipped. And this one is called Mapper. And it's a Safari extension that opens Google Maps links in Apple Maps. So you've probably been in that situation where you're on Google and you search for something and you find a Google link with directions. This will allow you to open up those links in Apple Maps instead of Google Maps. It turns out there's a lot of demand for this. This extension is shooting up the charts on the App Store and really is handy. I installed it right away as soon as I heard about it. All right, let's move on to Club Mac Stories. This was a cool week. Federico is working on his Obsidan setup series again. And this week, he is covering how he's using templates and things like that to do some of his MacStories work. And I, of course, did something that's become a bit of a tradition after Apple events. And that is I round up a collection of my favorite moments from the event itself and talk a little bit about those. It's a fun issue. And I had a tip as well, which is one that I don't think a lot of people know about working with widgets on the Mac. This week, App Stories was a little special too, because we didn't release the show when we normally would. Instead, we waited until after the Apple event, and then we recorded the show live in front of the Club MacStories Plus Discord audience in Discord, which is a lot of fun. We've been doing that. We've done it. This is the second time we've done it. And it's been a lot of fun because we do the show and then we take questions from club members. So check out plus.club if you want to join, because if you join the club, you can listen into events like this, ask questions, and get to hear everything a little bit earlier than normal. Next week, we're going to be covering my review of macOS Monterey on the show, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be out a little later than normal, too. We're going to release it to coincide with the release of the OS. All right, let me tell you a little bit about our sponsor today, and that is Do, the reminder app. You know what? This is one of my favorite utilities, and I really like the post that we have this week for this, the sponsorship post, because as the post says, annoying is probably not a word that most developers would like to hear associated with their app. But you know what? Do's developer certainly doesn't mind. That's because the fact that it can nag you is one of the core features, making it indispensable and a game changer for a lot of users. It's helped people living with ADHD keep on top of things that they need to do, people with early dementia. It's even saved marriages and some lives too. Now, the developer didn't set out to make an app that did all those things when it was developed initially. It's an app that was simply developed to help remember things. It's deceptively simple, though, because it makes it fast and simple to get the reminders into the app, and then impossible to ignore with the feature called Auto Snooze that lets you put off doing the task, but then constantly reminds you periodically that you have to do it. Learn more about what Do can do for you by going to doapp.com. That's DUEAPP.com, the premier annoying reminders app on the App Store. Our thanks to Do for their support of the show. All right. We've only got one Unwind pick today because it's just me, but I'm going to recommend something that we're listening to as part of Club MacStories Plus, which is Foundation. That's a TV Plus show based on the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. That's a series from a long ways back, and it's been adapted for television. And boy, this show is really kind of amazing. You can tell that there's a lot of money in each episode because the experience of watching it is a lot more like watching a movie than it is watching a TV show. It's right up there with things like Game of Thrones in terms of production quality and value. And beyond just the technical glitz of the show itself, the story has been really good. It jumps back and forth in time. It's science fiction, and it follows a number of characters throughout the course of time. I don't want to go into too much detail on this because I don't want to spoil any of the surprises because they start hitting you pretty early on in the series. And I'm not finished with it. It's not completely finished yet in any event. I think there are 5 or 6 episodes out now, and I've only watched the first few. But with the club, we're going to, in a couple of weeks, have a live audio chat and talk with some members all about the show up to that point, because this is part of our AV club, which is a lot of fun. We pick books, movies, music, video games, things like that each month to consume collectively and then chat about live in audio. And then we release the recording for the people who can't join us at the same time. That's a little pitch for Club MacStories Plus, which you can learn more about at plus.club. But whether or not you're a member of the club, you definitely should not miss Foundation because it's a really fantastic show. This is right up there in my mind for TV Plus with things like The Morning Show and Ted Lasso in terms of can't miss. Probably not going to be quite the phenomenon of something like Ted Lasso, which I think has a little broader universal appeal to it, and probably maybe not quite as broad-based appeal as The Morning Show either, but still a lot of fun. And if you like science fiction and enjoy a good outer space movie, you'll like this TV show because it plays, as I said, just like a movie. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. Next week's going to be a big one with the macOS Monterey review out on Monday, as well as an update about iOS and iPadOS 15.1. Federico's writing a story about that, so he'll have that out as soon as 15.1 comes out too. Thanks again to our sponsor for this episode, Do, the annoying but essential reminders app. And thanks to you for listening. I'll talk to you next week.